I'm going to try to do it in 45 minutes with you. And what I want to do is I want you to get the basic gist of it, understand it, and hopefully it'll inspire you to want to dig deeper in it. Because there's a lot, I'm sure there's places in North Carolina where you can, where there's a genuine retreat house or something like that, where you can go and get this stuff, because it's really worth getting. It's in the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, right? So it's really quite good. All right. So, the background on this. Ignatius, at a certain time in his life, was he dreamt about being a great warrior. He got into a big battle between two different towns, and he ended up getting hit in battle with a cannonball. You guys all know this story? No. Okay. Ignatius got hit with a cannonball, and his leg was totally shattered. And so he was convalescing, and the doctors had to break his leg a bunch of different times and set it. And he was convalescing over a long period of time. They didn't have anesthetics in those days, by the way, you guys. And they set it, and he set it wrong. So after it was, ossifying and all that over time, they had to re-break it all again. And then when they re-broke it, there was a bone sticking out of his knee, and he was still a little bit vain. And it didn't look good, and his leg was broken. And he wanted the doctors to get rid of that bone. And they said no, because it's going to hurt. And he told them to saw it off. And he actually sawed it off without anesthetics. And Ignatius was there, his brother was there with him, and he's just biting into a piece of leather. And his brother said he didn't make a sound. He was a very unique character, Ignatius. Really unique guy. But while he was convalescing over a long period of time, he noticed something. He would read books about being a great warrior and stories about heroism. And it inspired him, and he would think about it for long periods of time. And but he found out that those books would kind of hold his attention or lift him, inspire him for a time. But a relative of his, a woman, brought him a book on the lives of the saints. And he started reading those lives of the saints for the first time seriously. And they really captivated and captured him. And he noticed something. He noticed a difference between what the books that he read about just natural heroism and the books of the saints, that his meditation, his thought, and his imagination, as he thought about the saints and their lives, it stuck with him for a longer period of time and lifted him. And he felt a kind of energy and joy. And he noticed those movements in him. And this is what Ignatius would later say was the beginning of a journey. Ignatius really became the master in the Catholic Church of understanding the interior movements of the heart and knowing what movement comes from God and what movement comes from our enemy and what movement is just our own flesh, you might say, our own kind of natural desire. But fundamentally, to discern the two movements of what's moving me and why. How do I know? Because why do you want to know that? Because you want to discern what is Jesus saying to me and what am I doing about it. So you have to know who's talking to you and who's trying to influence you, right? And it takes some discipline and some learning. So what I'm going to do, I'm not sure what to do with my clicker. There it is right there. Okay, so for Ignatius, there was 3 steps to discernment. The first is awareness. Noticing the movements within. They describe it this way: the movements of the soul, spiritual experience, stirrings in the heart, and thoughts interiorly. That's the data. Being attentive to what's going on inside of me is the data that is meant to be discerned. I experience these movements within me. I'm attentive to them. So that's the first part, is noticing them and then reflecting on them as I'm seeking understanding. Right? I'm trying to understand the extent to which these different movements and stirrings, where they come from. Right? And so the discernments, they discern the characteristic features, its direction, and its origin. Its direction and its origin is what you want to get after. You want to try to understand. So your sheet, if you look at it, everything I'm going to say basically is summarized neatly on this little sheet. So that I've got this thing folded. I can show you my journal right now. It's in my journal. And I did this out regularly. What I wrote on the back, on my side, is I learned the movements of all the lies the devil likes to tell me. Right? And all the ways I get trapped into dialoguing with those lies. And how those lies become strongholds in my mind. And they slow me down and they beat me up. And they're fundamental lies. And then I have here in this column the truth that corresponds to those lies about myself and about God and about God's movement. And I write in here stuff about what I'm hearing from God. So this is real. This is not just an idea. This stuff is really helpful in day-to-day life and discernment. It's part of spiritual warfare. So the key, those are the elements of it. Noticing the movements, reflecting and getting understanding about the nature of those movements, their direction and their origin, and then taking action. Either accepting those movements or rejecting those movements. Does that make sense? Pretty simple? Okay. Now I'm talking to you all about this because you're disciples, you're warriors, you're people who've been deployed by Jesus, and you need to know this stuff. So, okay. Understanding the motion, discerning its characteristics, features, we said all that, origin, okay, let's see. Okay, first rule. Ignatius understood that there's two kinds of people, two classes of people that both God and the devil communicate with. The first class are those who are moving away from God and toward sin, right? Persons moving away from God to serious sin. God acts on them one way, and the devil acts on them in another way. So you need to understand, where is my life? Everybody in this room is the second person. You're moving away from mortal sin toward God. Everybody who's here, doesn't mean that you're perfect, you're not battling the sins in your life, but the fundamental direction of your life is toward God. And you want to move away from sin. You're fighting that battle. Does that make sense? There's some people, like when I was young, I was just living life every day. I didn't realize it, but I was saying yes to a whole lot of sin, and the devil just didn't want to get in my way. He just wanted to encourage me to keep doing what I was doing. I wasn't paying attention to my interior life. I wasn't listening, and at that time I wasn't serious about God. Okay? So, the second rule, persons going away from sin toward God. The enemy. So, in those situations, let me back up. For the person who's moving toward serious sin, what does the enemy do? He facilitates your imagination and your sensual pleasure. He basically says, keep doing what you're doing. Okay? So, one of the things we know, for example, that's ubiquitous in the culture these days is pornography. There's a huge percentage of boys, young men, college-age men, who watch pornography. And they get trapped in it. Okay? And guys who are not just men, by the way, girls do it too more now than any time ever. But the bottom line is there's guys who are not following God, they're not trying to fight it, and there are those guys who are following God and trying to fight it. You know what I mean? And they're kind of trapped in it. In the first case, they're not looking to change it, they're just looking for more of the same. And so what the devil does is he facilitates that. He doesn't want to get in the way of your movement towards sin. Why? Because his end game is he wants you spiritually dead. He wants to capture you for himself, right? So he doesn't want to get in the way. But for that person, the good spirit begins to sting the conscience to help you turn back to God, to try to awaken your conscience in some way. That'll be the activity of the Lord, basically, the Holy Spirit. See if I want to see anything else from that. The point is to get them to turn back, to appeal to reason, even to the point of causing some interior pain and difficulty, so you come to terms with the potential, the real consequences, and the ultimate consequences that are there to kind of set off an alarm in you. So the Spirit of God is trying to get at your conscience, the devil's trying to numb your conscience. Okay? Now we move to the second rule. Persons going away from sin toward God. Now that's you and me. Right? This is most of us. What does the enemy want to do? He wants to bite, sting, sadden, place obstacles, disquiet us with false reasons. Let me explain some of that a little bit. What do we mean by biting? What does he mean? Gnawing actions that produce anxiety in us and diminish peace within us and reduce energy to move toward God. He wants to get us to a place of being listless and also ultimately losing a hunger and a capacity to pursue God. A kind of sadness toward God and the things of God. Prayers are dull. Love of neighbor is low, right? Obstacles, doubts, fears, questions. How can I ever overcome this? False reasons. He offers false logic to our mind. Reasons why I can't continue in God's will. Now, you know who used to fight this? Great saint was Augustine. Remember some of Augustine's fight? He despaired that he was ever going to be able at times to get through his sinful habits. And the devil would convince him, give up. It's not worth the fight. You're never going to make it. And you kind of lose any sense that you have a capacity to be able to overcome it. You lose courage. So, on the other hand, what does the good spirit do? What does Jesus want to do? He wants to encourage you, strengthen you, console you with tears, inspirations, and quiet. And he eases and takes away obstacles. So, moments where, for example, you get a sense, you start to weep with God's help for your own sin. You know? And it's cleansing. Does that ever happen to you? And it cleanses you. And it's not a condemnation. You're actually filled with hope. You know, because you begin to hear the voice of God who never condemns you. Right? He comes to save you. So, this is how Ignatius described it anyway. Or consolation with tears that fill the heart with a secure knowledge of the Lord's favor, His presence. Tears of joy. Inspirations which give clarity about going forward toward the good. Quieting our hearts, removing anxiety, settling us down interiorly, beginning to experience certain kinds of peace. The first two rules contain the foundation for discerning the action of the Spirit's work in a person. Moving away from God, the enemy encourages, the good spirit troubles. Moving toward God, the enemy troubles, and the good spirit encourages. All the rest of the rules now, the remaining rules presume these two types of people. So the content that you're discerning are the movements, and you're discerning it in either one of two classes, you might say, or one of two conditions. And so you'll be able to understand which is from God and which is not from God based on the direction of your life. And I'd say for you guys, you're moving away from sin and you're moving toward God. Okay? Now, the rest of the rules are ways to fight the enemy's strategy along the way. Does that make sense? Okay. Now I want to go through some of these rules. These are golden. These are absolutely golden. They're precious. They're worth a lot. Okay. The third rule is what's called spiritual consolation, where God acts on you. You can't get it to happen. You can't. It's an action of God touching your soul and your spirit. And what happens is you get inflamed with the love of God. You begin to see all things in God, like your neighbor and even your enemies, like St. Francis this morning. That reading from Francis where he said, I love, even my enemies are my friends, right? And he was able to see all things in God. There's an increase of faith, hope, and love, interior joy that quiets and attracts toward heavenly things comes from God. This is a time of consolation. This is really important to understand about how God works. Okay? Consolation is meant to be a time of fruitfulness, right? The basic idea that Ignatius wants to tell us is, this time of consolation is the time when you make all the big decisions of your life. This is the time, and a time of consolation is when you decide, when you hear God's will for your life, and you make decisions. When God is near, when you know He's come to you, when you're seeing things clearly, when you're calm and you're settled interiorly, faith, hope, and love is rising in you. We've all had moments like that, haven't we? Right? Those are key moments to pay attention in your life because you're a person who's moving away from sin and toward God, and God's consolation has come upon you. So it's in those moments when making vocational decisions, making significant decisions about direction of your life, or discerning the question, what is God saying to me? This is the time you need to pay attention. That's the voice you want to hear. It's in that period of time that you want to take it in. Significant time to be able to hear the Lord. Often when He comes to speak to us in that very time. Does that make sense? All right. The past is replete with meaning. this is so important too, friends. What is he saying? You're sitting there and you have this time of grace, and you actually can look backward, and you can sense God's hand on your life at different times. And you sense the value and the meaning of your past. The present seems full, right? And you have hope for the future. You have a sense of confidence. Like, yeah, we can do this. I can do this. You know, God is with me, right? The future is sure and filled with hope. One of the things Ignatius taught us is the devil wants to, and it'll come next in this time, what's kind of called time of desolation. The fourth rule, the spiritual desolation. It's the opposite, it's the contrary of this. It's a time of darkness of soul and disturbances, and we're attracted to low and earthly things. We're disquieted, we're agitated and full of temptations inside, and we lack confidence. We feel without hope, faith, hope, and love. We feel slothful and tepid and sad and feeling as if separated from God. God does not cause these states. God permits these states to happen. He does not cause them. Now, think about this. Like I've had periods like this where it just comes to you and you find yourself in this kind of desolate period. And you start thinking, my past. You think of all the negative things. In an instant, I can think of all the negative things in my past start coming at me. I mean, even when I'm sitting down for prayer when you're in a time of desolation before God, I'm just trying to place myself there as the Son of God, and all I think about is all my failures. From the time I was a little kid, they come out just like this. They're super easy to remember, just like that, without any help. You know, without any attempt, I mean, to try to make it happen. And they're there. And then what comes with it is condemnation. A sense of, man, you know what I'm saying? And what the devil wants to do then is he wants to claim your past. And he wants to say, look at your history. Look at what you did. Your history then, what he wants to do is going to shape your identity and your destiny. He wants to tell you your history is your destiny. Right? And then what Ignatius says in this period of time is to say, don't let the devil be your counselor. Here's the temptation. We end up saying, here's what I've wrestled with. Even at this stage of my life it's happened, like this past year. I mean, stuff that I never remembered for all these years, and all of a sudden, I'm in this period, and I'm remembering stuff I did when I was like 10 years old and 12 years old that I had totally forgotten. And I'm feeling condemned by it. I'm feeling like, what were you thinking, man? You know, all these kinds of things. And I start, without thinking about it, I'm in a dialogue with the devil. And he's like, he's saying, do you see the stuff you're made of? God's got to be disappointed in you, man. And you're just not made of the same stuff as these other people. You know? Hey, look, I work with Ralph Martin and Ann Shields all the time. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I like those two. You know, they're like superstars. You know, they're living saints or whatever, right? And you can all this silly, because I feel like I can't deny it. And it's like, okay, you're right. You know what I mean? And it gets a hold of you, and he wants to be able to shape your identity. Because remember, his whole interest is to stop your momentum. He wants to get you out of mission. He wants to discourage you in your attempt to say yes to God's love. And so it makes it very difficult. You're kind of like slogging through it, and there's a kind of a heavy blanket on you. It's a heavy blanket of discouragement. And in the midst of it, like Ignatius said, all of a sudden old temptations emerge. And tapes go through your head. Or you get tempted by things that, what the heck? You know, I had this temptation, you know, and I said, man, I haven't thought that way for 10 years. Where'd that come from? And I start to get attracted to old sin, habit patterns of sin. Right? Does that happen to anybody except me? Okay, there's like 3 of us, you big liars. You're just like, yeah, you know? And so Ignatius is trying to say, understand what's going on spiritually. This is not the time to change anything. We'll get to the next rule, okay? Okay, let's talk a little bit more. The devil wants to empty your past of meaning and value. He wants to leave you languishing and hopeless in the present. He wants to claim total power over your future. A power of infallibility to predict and determine, guess what? Things are not going to work out well for you. You know, you're never going to find the right guy. You're never going to find the right girl. Why? Because you're not very lovable. Why? Because if people really knew what you were like, they wouldn't want to get close to you, right? I mean, you name it. Kind of go on and on. He wants to declare his lordship over your future. And the only way he can do it is if he can deceive you and lie to you and get that to be the tape that's running in your head. And I'm telling you, after being in a lot of ministry for 40 years all over the world, you'd be surprised how many people are mainly listening to that tape in their head. And they're mostly discouraged. Right? And then that gets projected on God the Father. And on Jesus, as I was saying earlier this morning. And we get, instead of receiving the gift of salvation and God's love and forgiveness, we start saying, oh my gosh, what's my situation? I gotta make sure I'm doing enough good to outweigh the bad. Am I a good person? Well, I have to make sure I'm doing the right thing. And then we start getting this crazy deal. If I've done enough good, I feel okay. If I've done better, then I feel condemned. And we lose sight of the fact that salvation is God's gift to us. That he came to us out of love while we were still sinners, and he loves us radically. He'll never stop loving us radically. Right? But we don't believe that at a certain point. And what the devil's after, as I was saying, is slowing us down. This is really big stuff. It is dark wisdom. It's the time of a lie, and we should never, never, never listen to it. This is a time when lots of people change their life. I want to find a new husband. I want to find a new wife. I want to get out of this difficult job situation I'm in. I'm going to stop praying in the morning. Prayer is just too hard. I'm just discouraged. I'm just not going to pray anymore. So what Ignatius says, that the next rule is this. This is a hugely important rule for us in the spiritual life. Never, 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 never make a change in a spiritual proposal during a time of desolation. Ever. Be firm and constant in the proposals made in the preceding consolation. Anything that God gave you in a consolation that you said yes to and you're moving in, it's going to be tested. It will be tested. And God permits the test to happen because he wants you to grow up. He wants you to be strong. He wants you to learn how to fight through this. And there's always enough grace to get through this. But these things can be really difficult and they can be very dark. And so, maturing, I mean, remember Jesus at Gethsemane, right? It was a time of desolation for Christ. And he said yes to the Father. Take this cup from me. Father, where are you? Blah, blah, blah. Not my will, but yours be done. I trust you. He had on that cross, he did not have a feeling. I mean, everything literally in his entire body said, I'm living the worst nightmare possible. It was horrible. He was treated as a criminal, stripped naked, bleeding to death. His friends all left him. Not my will, but yours be done. Father, I trust you. Jesus, I trust you. In this time of desolation. And so, this is one of the rules that Ignatius said. This rule, and I think it's rule number 12, will keep you out of a lot of spiritual trouble along in your life. So, stay with those decisions you made. A right decision cannot be reached with the enemy as your counselor. Right? Even simple temptations, I'm in this time of darkness and I'm lonely and I want this bad feeling to go away. So what do? The devil says, hey, how's it going? He says, how about if you medicate yourself just a little bit? Just a little bit. Have a little too much to drink, or just escape, young man. Just go turn on your computer and go live in a fantasy land. Or stop praying and get preoccupied in your phone, you know what I mean? And just get caught up in stuff. He wants to knock you off your course. So if you made a decision to say, look, I'm going to pray every morning for a half an hour, and you've been doing it for a time, don't stop doing it. Don't decide to do it at a time of desolation. The devil's going to come after you in those moments because he probably smells that there's something good happening in you and he wants to get you out of the pathway that you're on. Right? So as you're discerning, you're saying, what's the root of these feelings? I know that I move into a God. Wow. I just feel so tepid. I feel so, it just feels kind of dark. I feel under accusation. I feel, these movements that are happening inside you. And where's that coming from? It's coming from the enemy. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to say, and devil, get the hell out of here. You can say that. You can say that to him. You can say that to him. In Jesus' name. And I'm going to take authority right now. I am not even going to listen, because this is not the voice of my king. This is not my loving Father. And I'm not going to sit under the counsel of my enemy. What do you think? I'm stupid, devil? But it's very tempting to do it. And a lot of people. What was King David thinking when he was on the roof of his house? And he saw Bathsheba taking a bath. This is a guy who had 800 concubines. What the heck's the deal, man? And he sees this beautiful woman. Who knows what was going on? He had lots of trouble. There were a lot of people who were after him. Saul and others. And you can hear it in the Psalms. And the devil is probably saying to him, hey, you're the king, man. You can have whatever you want. It's not going to be a big deal. Right? So he has Bathsheba. And then the devil says, hey, you, man, you're dumb. You know what you just did? His heart's falling in love with someone else's wife. And then you better deal with the temptation leads to adultery. It feels all real good. At the beginning, it all feels good. It feels right. The devil's got him deep. He trapped him. And then he ends up killing, basically having her husband killed, essentially. Right? So, he was listening to the wrong voice at the wrong time. Right? And he must have had a vulnerability. He had a particular kind of weakness in the devil's circle. We'll see that at the end of these rules as well. Okay, so don't change the direction of your life in a time of desolation. Big, big, important rule. Okay, then what do you do in a time of desolation? All these rules now are about how do you deal with desolation. The rest of the rules are all about dealing with desolation. Okay? First, resist the desolation by changing oneself intensely. Increase prayer, meditation, much examination, and suitable penance. So don't, as soon as you feel like in those times that you're going to back down from your prayer disciplines and those kinds of things, redouble it. And it's really helpful. We'll see later. If you can't feel like you have the energy, tell somebody about it who you trust. Say, man, I'm battling something here, and I'm finding myself just drifting away from my commitments to the Lord, and I don't want to do them. I'm losing a taste for it. I'm losing faith that it matters anyway, and all that battle can go on inside. So double down on your prayer, meditation. What's meditation? Meditation is literally like taking up God's Word like Lectio Divina. You guys know what Lectio Divina is? Everybody, you take a passage, put yourself in that passage, meditate on it, think about what the Lord is saying, position yourself in it. It's like drawing out from the Scripture. That's different than contemplation, which God acts on you. God comes to you in a particular grace. You can't make contemplation happen. But when it happens, whenever contemplation happens, the Holy Spirit comes to you and you just feel lifted and you're being filled with the Lord and time is like you're just not thinking about time very much. Stay in it. Just stay in it until the Lord says stop, until the Lord stops it, Those are important times to harvest. Those are partly times of consolation. Okay? Another rule. The seventh rule. Let me take suitable penance. You know what I mean? Examination of conscience is what he means by examination. Examine your life. Examine your conscience. Understand what's going on. Have you given the devil a handle? Rule number 7. Consider how the Lord allowed trials so you can learn to resist. Understand that the Lord permits this. He didn't cause it. And you can do all things in Him who strengthens you, right? I can do all things in Him who strengthens me. Divine help is on the way. Remind yourself. He's right here. He's on the way. This desolation will pass. You've got to have some kind of hope in the midst of that context of desolation. God always leaves sufficient grace for salvation. There's always grace to get out of it. Sometimes it feels like there isn't, but there is. And the Lord knows how much you can handle if you're cooperating with Him. Okay, rule number 8. In desolation, be patient. consolation will return. Don't panic, don't run. Just be patient, take a breath. And it's a great time to surrender yourself to the Lord.